Right. Has it come up to say we're all brilliant? Thank you. Right then, I think, right, shall we get ready to go then? Fab. So, officially, welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. My name is Elaine. I am the head of partnerships for the Social Housing Roundtable, and for the eagle-eyed amongst you, not Matt. Matt is busy, doing more speaking slots. His diary is incredibly busy at the moment, but hopefully I'll stand in. And I'm delighted to have, what can I call you, a Social Housing Roundtable veteran? Yeah, Jenny,
I
do you think?
am a veteran. Yeah, this is
Fine.
the third time.
So
Amazing.
absolutely delighted to have you join us today. Just a quick intro for those people who haven't been on one of these before. The Social Housing Roundtable was set up 4 years ago with the idea and the aim of really bringing people together to have kind of an accessible, informal, exciting conversation about the key issues that really exist within the social housing sector. Um, that was about 4 years ago. Over 130 sessions later, we now have over 1,500 of you lot all subscribing. So thank you very much for your support and ongoing kind of efforts and energies that you do to make these community conversations on this community really kind of vibrant and a great place to be. Before we start, we have to say thank yous to this year's sponsors. That's Alertical. Sponsorship goes some of the way to help kind of make this happen for everybody and make sure that we keep it kind of free to access, so we don't have to charge you anything, so we can still kind of have these really kind of diverse and exciting conversations for nothing. But a big part of what we do is kind of funded by Matt's recruitment business. So again, thank you for continuing to sponsor and support Matt with that as well. Um, here we are, and I think there is a real opportunity now for us me to introduce Jenny. She will talk a little bit for 20 minutes on the kind of subject. She introduces that, and then we have an opportunity for kind of that open and exciting debate, I think, today. Please, as a reminder, this is a kind of safe and a kind of respectful place. So lots of people are going to have different views. Do feel free to pop your hand up, pop some things in the chat, have a conversation, really get those kind of ideas and kind of insights out there as well. And I think that is everything I need to say in terms of just the introduction. So I'm delighted to be welcomed by Jenny. Like you say, you're back again, and we're very, very happy to have you. Um, Jenny has supported the roundtable over the last kind of 4 years, I think, and is going to talk to you a little bit today about kind of mental health. We know that these topics can be potentially a little bit triggering for people and a little bit sensitive and delicate at times. So whilst we encourage you to have your cameras on, they're absolutely not compulsory. And if there is anything, as you know, these sessions are recorded and published. So if there is anything that you'd like to say here, but then edited out with the recording, please do contact myself or Matt afterwards to do that as well. So without further ado, I've tried to give you as much time as possible by rattling through my introduction. Jenny, over to you.
Thank you so much, Elaine. Thanks for having me back in. And hi, everyone. It's lovely to see some familiar faces out there. And some of you I don't know as well. So I'll do a little bit of an intro for me first. My name is Jennie Blake, as it says on the profile. I'm a trainer and consultant in the housing sector. Well, actually, no, I'm not going to limit myself to the housing sector. I'm going to say the third sector. But my background was predominantly from the homelessness sector. So I worked in supported housing, starting actually from about 28 years ago. So I've been knocking around for a bit. I started out as a volunteer, worked my way through various support positions, managed teams, left the sector as a senior manager at the end of 2020 and set up my business as a trainer and coach and consultant. So I do deliver some training around kind of what I call core skills for support work, but predominantly my work is around stress, well-being and resilience in our sector. I'm also a hypnotherapist and a solutions-focused practitioner. And I should get this out at the start, I am not a mental health first aid trainer. So that's my disclaimer. I'm not a mental health first aid trainer. I have completed the mental health first aid training, so I can comment on it, but that's not what I deliver. So today we are going to talk about why mental health first aid isn't the cure-all. Okay, so it's going to be a bit controversial, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and feelings about this. But let's jump straight in. So the first thing I would like us to discuss is really, what is mental first aid? Oh, can I just make sure everyone's muted? We've got some little background sounds. There we go. There we go. Okay, good stuff. So let's discuss what mental health first aid is. Can anyone tell me? I mean, feel free to jump on the mic or maybe pop a message into the chat box. What is mental health first aid? You know it's going to be an interactive session with me. What do you think? What is it? What is mental health first aid? Any answers?
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Romana. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I am actually mental health first aider.
Great.
Thank you. I've joined about 6 months ago. For me, what it is a person, somebody that we can reach out to if we're struggling.
Okay.
Or we can advise our colleagues who first aiders are if we feel that they can benefit to speak to somebody. They're not there to diagnose anybody. They're there to listen and signpost them to different people who are professionals and can help them.
Yes, absolutely right. Fantastic. And thank you for being brave enough to jump on the mic before anyone else as well. Like, really love that. Thank you.
No problem.
We've also got some answers in the chat. So hi, Lindsay. Lindsay's saying it's supporting those with initial help and refer appropriately. Tony, hi, Tony. Tony's saying teaching someone that they do
have a mental health
issue. Have a mental health issue. Okay. We've got identifying, Jodie, hi Jodie, identifying where someone may be struggling, checking in on them, signposting them to resources that can help, etc. Okay, good. We've got the general gist of this. It's actually mental health awareness training. So if we talk about mental health first aid, the training, it is mental health awareness training for the workplace. And it's primarily to identify, understand, and respond to people who are having some kind of mental health experience. Now, we all have mental health experiences, some better, some worse, and it's just to have that kind of first responder there. So I'm going to give you some facts about it now. Some of these things you probably know already, some of them may be less so. Like I've just said, it's mental health awareness training. It ranges because there's a variety of lengths of the training that you can do. So it ranges from 1 day to 5 days training. This is something I think we probably should talk about. There are lots of providers who deliver the training to organisations. We don't talk about very many of those providers. We primarily talk about Mental Health First Aid England, like they seem to have the monopoly on the training, but there are lots and lots of other providers who do provide the training. So yeah, something to consider. Something that I hear a lot is that it's compared with regular, what I'll call regular first aiders. So you might say physical first aiders. You know, people say, well, we have physical first aiders, so why don't we have mental health first aiders too? So that's something that I kind of hear in conversations around it. I don't know if any of you have heard that as well. It definitely aims to support staff who experience mental ill health. That's really what organisations are getting it into their workplaces. Oh, I've lost my slide. There we go. And overall, organisations who provide this are really aiming to reduce the number of lost working days. You know, those working days that have been lost due to mental ill health. So where people are taking time off sick because they're stressed or they're anxious or depressed, those kinds of things. Now, another fact that I want to just throw in there is that last year a bill was proposed. Some of you may know this, I don't know if you all are familiar with this, but a Tory MP, Dean Russell, proposed a bill in Parliament to offer mental health first aid as a requirement in all workplaces. Now, it wasn't passed, but I really think that it's interesting that it was on the table, and I think that there's often a lot of discussion around whether this is something that should be mandatory for all workplaces to provide. Oh, I've got a couple more comments in the chat, so let's just have a quick look at that. Oh yeah, Grace and Oh, look, Marie, great, you're making a suggestion. There's other people who do this. Yes. So let's share the training love. There are other providers. Good. So I want to get a sense, just before we go any further with this, of how many of you have mental health first aiders in your organisation. So if you could maybe use one of your emojis or raise a hand or something, just for us to see how many people have this in place in their organisations. I can see one. Oh, we've got a few. I can see 4. Yep.
At least 4, yep.
At least 4. Oh, potentially 5. Any others? Oh, I got a wave there, Natalie. I think I saw you wave. Yeah. We're going old school with the actual wave. Yeah. Okay, good. A few. There's a good question Tony's just popped into the chat. Okay, my next question, for those of you who are saying that it is offered in your organisation, and I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this, but if you do have it in your organisation, can you tell me if there have been any positive outcomes recorded by your organisation as a result of having this in place? That's a big question, and I don't know if you'll know the answer, but some of you may. Oh, Toshin's saying unaware. Alice is saying not sure. Yeah, don't know of any recording. Jess has said yes. So that's good. I would love to know, Jess, what has been recorded by the organisation in terms of positive outcomes. Do you know? Where are you, Jess?
Sorry, yeah, I'm here. It's easier to unmute and talk to you. So yes, so it's shared widely that it's available on our internal comms.
Yeah.
Obviously, no details have been shared.
Yeah.
But there are, because it's obviously private and personal, and will be detrimental. However, they do share how many people have used the service, as in, so out of a percentage of maybe in the company, or and also then obviously the follow on as well. So there are lots of, we've got the mental health first aiders, but then there's also a follow on service that we have from that as well. And I myself have used both. So yeah, there's lots shared in that respect, but nothing actually, I guess, that's as close as it gets stats wise.
Yeah.
Because they've got to be careful, obviously, with what they record. And
yeah, you have. The reason I ask that is because I really want organisations to start thinking about the return on investment. So if we're investing in something because we want to offer support, or we want to reduce the number of sick days, or whatever it is, we need to make sure that this is the right solution and it is actually having the impact that we're hoping that it's going to have. What I'm seeing is not so many organisations record enough information, if any at all, to be sure that that's the case. So it could be the case in some organisations, nothing is recorded at all. You would have no idea if it was even being used, let alone if there were any actual outcomes, or indeed if there was a negative impact rather than a positive impact. So that's just one of the issues. And it's like I said, it's just really trying to get to think about it and consider, is this the right solution to our problem? But let's talk some more about it, I suppose, about mental health first aid as a training package, as a support intervention. So I've just shared with you all some facts. I think we could all agree. Let's now have a look at some myths. So the first thing is, oh, James, your hand is up. Did you want to ask a question? Do you want to jump on?
Right, hi.
Hi, James.
You can appreciate I'm a tenant, an involved tenant, collaborative tenant. So I spent 30 odd years both working as an auxiliary psyche nurse, general nursing. I worked for PSS, Personal Service Society, the very first organisation in the country that independently looked at social work and helping in this way. So the old adage is, you cannot work in a paint factory without getting splashed, and I'm the living proof. Yeah. This is the reason why for so many years I haven't worked alongside other bits and pieces, but I've worked within looking after adults with autism, Asperger's and things, and later getting diagnosed myself. So the whole subject that you're referring to today, and this is one that I actually raised with Richard Blakeway and Jonathan Walters, saying that if you are going to put all these extra, you know, jobs into place, in other words, social work and things like this for housing officers and things, they will eventually start to suffer mental health, you know, problems themselves. It's something that's waiting in the wings to happen. I said this from the very, very start. I also emphasize the importance of, when you have housing officers who now will be dealing with antisocial behaviours and things, the fact is they can be followed home. The fact of the stress at the weekend, trying to live a family life and to put normality there, when they're worried, is this person really going to commit suicide because they haven't homed them?
Yeah.
So all of these things have come to pass. So what you're talking about today is something I've been actually going on about for a good number of years.
Yes.
So I'm really pleased that you're dealing with them.
Great. James, I would also refer you to the last time I came onto the roundtable when I talked about trauma. So as from the perspective of staff experience in trauma from the work that we're doing. Yeah. So that one might be, I'm sure it's on YouTube or something. You can see a past one. Fabulous. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the myths then in relation to mental health first aid specifically. The first is what we've just really spoken about, and that is that it has a good return on investment. Actually, nobody knows. Nobody knows if it's good value for money because so little is being recorded. So it's an assumption that it will be a good return on investment. Of course, because in the best possible scenario, maybe it's going to save somebody's life, you know, and like in the best possible scenario, that's fantastic. You can't put a value on that. I totally get it. However, the worst possible scenario is that actually nobody uses the mental health first aiders. And that's for a variety of reasons. And that's not being recorded by lots and lots of organisations. So the organisation just keeps pouring money at it without being able to actually assess whether it has been good value for money. And that is to the detriment to other interventions that perhaps could have been more useful or effective. So that's one of the myths. Another myth is that it reduces mental health stigma in the workplace. Actually, there isn't much evidence to show that this is true. There isn't much evidence to confirm this. There are some studies, and I've actually, if anyone's interested, I can probably send a list afterwards. There are some studies that show that stigma is reduced. There's one particular study in Australia in 2018, and it did show that some stigma was reduced, but it was a very small study, and it showed that changes in stigma was over quite a small period of time, so 6 months, in fact. And it was kind of argued, the counter argument to that was that actually in a sector where there's a high turnover of staff, is this kind of sustainable, or would it be only for a short, you know, for example, when the intervention is implemented for the first time and there's lots of people talking about it, oh, we've got mental health first aiders, and everyone's kind of feeling like we're going to talk about mental health now, it might work for that short period and then not really for much longer. Or when you've got new staff coming in, they don't even know about it. So there's something in there around, well, is it true? Does it reduce stigma? Not really too sure. Another myth is that it improves the mental health of the recipient. Again, this is another assumption, and maybe it does for some people, but we don't know because we're not doing any follow-up necessarily with that person. So one of the issues that I'm going to be talking about today is the fact that we don't have enough systems and processes in place to actually show whether this is working, whether it's effective, whether somebody feels supported, whether they got good information and support or poor information and support. But in terms of, you know, as an initiative, as an intervention, it is a myth. It is an assumption that it will improve the mental health of the recipient. There just isn't the evidence to prove otherwise, okay? There have been no studies which demonstrate that mental health first aid serves that intended purpose of helping individuals with mental illness or in crisis, let's say, and whether that's to connect them with treatment or to improve their symptoms. There's just not enough data. Another myth is that it reduces absenteeism or the number of working days lost to mental ill health. Although that's one of its primary aims, again, there is no evidence to back this up. So there's no evidence to show that it is. The real shame of this, and I think you can tell that I'm kind of been talking about this a little bit already, the shame of this is that because most organisations, and Jess, I'm happy that your organisation is collecting some data on this, but so many organisations don't collect anything at all. Because most organisations don't record any data, even if it did reduce sick days, they wouldn't be able to show that that reduction in sick days was caused by the intervention. They wouldn't be able to make that correlation. There would be no evidence to show that access to mental health first aiders have been reducing the number of sick days. So that's a real issue. Let's have a look at the next. Oh, there's loads of points in the chat. Let me go through these myths and then I'll have a look at the questions in the chat. The fifth one is that mental health first aid is effective as a method of support. I feel like you know where I'm going to go with this now. Yeah, look, there's been actually a review of trials. There was a review of 21 trials, and it found that there was a lack of good quality evidence for the effectiveness of mental health first aid training. It also found that many of the studies had a high risk of bias. So as an example, some of the studies that have been done by Mental Health First Aid England, and they're going to have, a particular bias and they're going to want to show stats in a particular way. So we do need better quality research being done by more objective organisations, I would suggest. And the last one, the last myth, is that it fulfills your duties under the Health and Safety Executive Regulations. So let's just take a step back from that one. Let's just think about why so many organisations want to offer mental health first aid. Aside from reducing sick days and supporting people, in part, it might be because the organisations want to fulfil their duties under the HSE regulations. We know that there's a duty to manage psychosocial risks, which includes workplace stress. And there is a need to demonstrate that organisations are prioritising employees' mental well-being. So it's quite a nice visible thing that an organisation can do to try and tick that box. But mental health first aid might not be the right solution for that particular problem. I don't think we've got enough evidence to show that it is hitting that target. So let's have a look at your comments in the chat now. Right. Tony saying, surely that depends on the cause of the mental health. I'm not sure what that was in relation to, but was that one of the myths, Tony?
Yeah, it was. It was, where is it? It was on one of your slides, and I said, surely that depends on the cause of the mental health.
Yeah. So is that maybe about whether it's
caused in the workplace, or supposing it comes from home and they're living with it in work?
Yeah. So that can absolutely, I'm not sure what the difference would be where the stresses come from. I mean, I think in terms of your the HSE regulations, that's about managing workplace stress specifically. I don't know if providing mental health first aid can help you reduce workplace stress. I don't know if those two things are related. If the cause of your workplace stress is, I don't know, being under-resourced, for example, having a manager that's never had good training and doesn't know how to, I don't know, engage with their team very well, no amount of having a mental health first aider that's not going to address the cause of that stress. So for me, that's like, it's the wrong solution to the problem. I don't know, but do you have anything more to say on that, Tony?
No, I was thinking of events in home, like a bad social environment or a death that's causing stress outside of work.
Yeah.
But then the person comes to work already stressed.
Yeah. And so how does mental health first aid fit into that for you?
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
I think it's a good point, isn't it, Jenny, in terms of, you know, the causes of the kind of the mental health concerns in the workplace already. And I think, you know, like in a previous roundtable, you've perhaps talked about trauma and resilience, and, you know, we hear a lot around how kind of the role of the customer facing or the kind of public facing people is changing, as kind of different things are happening to kind of the people we work with in terms of our tenants and our residents. But I think, you know, Tony's point on, you might bring a lot with you to work, and I guess how is that mental health first aider's responsibility, and does mental health first aid, I guess, extend into non-work?
Okay, if that's the question,
you know, I think if that's perhaps what we're trying to just understand is.
Yeah, that's what I was driving at.
Okay, I got you. I've got you. Okay, mental health is mental health. It's not mental health different. You know, your mental health isn't different in the workplace. So it is like you have a mental health. It could be good mental health. It could be poor mental health. But yeah, so it doesn't matter where that is. You know, if you want to speak to a mental health first aider, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. It doesn't have to be stuff that's only happening in the workplace. It's about how things are making you feel, how things that are happening at home may impact how you show up at work, of course. So yeah, you could speak to a mental health first aider about any of those causes of stress. And that's again why there's a bit of a separation between mental health first aid as an intervention and this kind of idea that there are duties under the health and safety executive to manage workplace stress. They can't manage your stress at home. You know, they can only manage stress. Your organization can't manage the things that are causing you stress in your personal life. They can only and should only be managing the causes of stress in the workplace. Brian, your hand has been up for ages. You've been waiting very patiently. Do you have a question?
Question and an observation.
Yes.
I think probably part of the mental health stress, and I worked for years at customer facing. I was a front of house manager in the hotels for many years. So as you can imagine, if somebody wasn't happy, I was at the reception desk, and I would get the grief, as you know, would be normal, and I think sometimes what happens is, and it happens, it's happening quite a lot, I think, in the housing sector at the moment, is you have people who are square pegs going into round holes.
Yeah.
And you're starting off in a situation where their perception of what their job is and what their role is not necessarily clear. And that in itself is a cause of many people, you know, in any industry who will get stress. If, you know, I've never welded anything in my life. So if I was put into an engineering company, you know, probably quite a lot of people here, and said, I want that weld done and I want it done perfectly first time, you would, your stress levels would seriously go way over the top.
Yeah.
And I think this is part of the problem, is that there's a lot of perception of what a job is, but the reality is different. And it's partly down to employers not detailing the information and detailing the role to people, and saying, you know, look, you know, if I said to you tomorrow, there's a housing manager's role, there you go, there's that job for you.
Yeah.
You would probably say, okay, right. But your stress levels will start to go up if you've never experienced what it is. And I think it's that experience. You know, I had it at times where I would have people who came out of college and university with an education, who had trained in the hotel and catering industry. You put them on the reception desk in front of a grumpy customer, and you could see the stress levels rise.
Absolutely.
Because that understanding of what the face-to-face contact. Now, I always had a situation where I had somebody, you know, I could go into an office, close the door and scream. But people don't understand that. People don't understand that anymore. That, you know, sometimes, yes, you have things to deal with, and yes, they will stress you out. but it's understanding where it's coming from. If there's a problem and an issue, it's the basics. And I hate to use this because a previous prime minister used it. In some cases, we need to go back to the basics and look at, are we telling people, this is your job?
Yeah.
You know, do you understand what this is? Do you understand where you've got a tenant who's phoned up 15 times to get a leaking tap repaired and has nothing, you know, it's not happened.
You're
and
right,
they're stressed out.
Yeah.
You know, not only are they stressed out, they're probably ready to blow their top. But you have to dig down and understand where they're coming from. And that in its own way is a relief for mental health and a relief from that stress and anxiety that people get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, Brian. I think, you know, what, to summarize your point, I think what I'm hearing is, you know, I think workplace and jobs are changing, and there is an expectation or a requirement from an employer to help them and help the kind of colleagues understand what's expected of them, and perhaps where those expectations aren't clear, the individual can kind of fall foul of putting additional pressure or stress on themselves. And I think going forward, you know, I think, and I'm sure Jennie will talk a little bit about perhaps, you know, communication or what else is required in terms of kind of supporting positive mental health in the workplace.
Yeah, if you put a square peg into a round hole, you're going to have issues, you're going to have problems, and you're going to have that lack of understanding of where somebody's coming from and understanding how to deal with it from there.
Thanks, Brian.
Totally agree.
This episode of the Social Housing Roundtable is sponsored by Alertical. Alertical helps as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. Alertical's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Calls, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alertical works with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and landlords. In 2022, Alertical won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023 won Housing Supplier of the Year. I'm delighted to have them as our sponsor of the Social Housing Roundtable throughout 2024.
Brian, just to say to everyone, James, I see your hand up as well, but don't forget, today's session, we're not talking about mental health in the sector. We're talking about a specific intervention that's being offered, which is mental health first aid in the sector. So my previous talks, I think I've talked about trauma in social housing. I can't remember what the first one was, Elaine. It would have been something related, so it might well have been mental health. And I know that I have talked about, you know, because all of these things that you're saying are absolutely right. This is literally the work that I do now. Our sector, we're great at talking about our clients, our customers, the people that we serve, and the stress and their well-being and being trauma informed for them. We're less good at looking at how staff are coping in a sector that is really challenging, really emotionally demanding, underpaid, overstretched, huge staff turnover, you know, all of those problems that really ramp up the pressure on staff. And yeah, so this is the work that I do. But this topic for today is specifically about one of the interventions that's being offered, apparently to cure all of that. So mental health first aid as an intervention, is it working? So that's what I'm just trying to bring it back to that. So that we don't
Jennie, a really interesting comment within the chat just around, you know, how empowered mental health first aiders are as well in terms of next steps and referrals and the kind of third party or the stakeholder, I guess, the next step within kind of mental health, whether that's, you know, their stretch and there's long waiting lists and there's all of those sorts of things. Just on that kind of mental first aid role.
We're going to talk a little bit about that next. I've just noticed that, James, your hand is up. Do you want to add something to this in terms of the myths, or if it's just about mental health generally, can we wait until the end for that bit? Go on, you're muted, James.
No, I just to say with the increase that's now happening within this, within the staffing levels of the people who are dealing with that, and the qualifications of the staff who are becoming the first aiders, like first responders, if you will.
Yeah.
Have they got that full qualifications? It appears from what I see in the chat that yes, they have. So that's great, really. But is this going to be the thin end of the wedge now? Is this going to become the norm where there are all kinds of anger management, stress clinics, all the rest of it that are out there? Will this now be coming into the workplace, and will it become yet another role of housing?
Yeah, potentially, and that's why I want us to talk about this. Particularly because there are MPs that are trying to push it through as being mandatory, and I just don't think it is the cure for everything. So
it's too much too American, and as I say, assume makes an ass of you and me. So assume it works, and behaviour breeds behaviour is the other one. Exactly. All good marketing terms, but all being used now in mental health and every other form of life.
Thanks, James.
Okay.
Let's have a look at some of the risks.
Like that one.
This may help you make up your mind. Let's have a look at some of the risks. So I want to divide this into 3 parts, really, and just thinking about the risks and the limitations of mental health first aid as an intervention. So for me, the first area of risk is to the mental health first aider. So that is the person who has been trained. Now, as James just rightly said, have they been trained? What have they received? It varies. Okay, remember at the start I said that it varies from 1 to 5 days training. My experience when I did the training was that it was very familiar to me. I've worked in the sector for a long time. So back in the day, when I trained as a support worker, I actually received some really good mental health training, and that was to support my service users, back in the day. It was very similar to that kind of training. So when I did the mental health first aid training, I was like, okay, this is stuff that I learned as a support worker, and now I'm just applying it to my colleagues potentially. But the training, like I said, it varies. You could do it for a day, you could do it for 5 days, you could do it for 2 days. So that's going to vary the level. You are not a therapist, you're not a counsellor, you're not a psychologist, you're not qualified in that regard. So let's just think about the risks then to this person who has received the training. They are now named by the organisation as a mental health first aider. I would say there's probably more risks than this, and you can all add some more in the chat if you think that there are some more risks than this. But my first area of concern is that there's not necessarily any specialist supervision. So who supports them? They are potentially talking to a number of people who work in the organisation who are experiencing a range of mental health issues, let's say, and it would vary massively. Do they, the mental health first aider, do they just keep that all to themselves? Yes or no? Do they tell their own manager? Yes or no? Is their own manager have their own manager received mental health first aid training? Yes or no? Like, there's lots of question marks about this. Do they tell HR? Yes or no? So if somebody has come to them in the organisation said, I'm suicidal, do they tell HR? Is there a duty of care for them to breach confidentiality to that person and tell HR? Or would they think, actually, this should be confidential to me and this person who's trusted me to have this conversation? Where are the rules around this? My greatest concern is that the training is provided to organisations and it isn't mandatory to put rules in place around this. So an organisation is then just left to do what they want to do with this. Certainly, I have spoken to mental health first aiders and I've questioned them this. So if somebody said to you X, Y, and Z, what would you do with that information? And they're like, well, it's confidential, or I treat it as a safeguarding. It's like, well, what's the actual procedure here? Because if people are just left to make this up, then people are going to do different things. And there is a huge potential for that mental health first aider to carry the weight of this without proper support themselves. So that really leads on to my next point there, which is that there are no systems which are automatically set up just because an organisation has put mental health first aid into their organisation. Those systems are voluntary. If an organisation asks the training provider for assistance to set up systems and processes, then I'm pretty sure most mental health first aid trainers would give them assistance. But again, that is not mandatory. So an organisation with all the best meaning and will in the world can sign up, get the training done, get some mental health first aiders in place and not have any other systems around it. There's no requirement to have those systems set up. Like I've said, it's therefore very unclear what the boundaries are around confidentiality versus reporting. Who do we report to? If we're going to report something, who are we going to report to? How is this going to be recorded? Should HR know about this? Should somebody's manager know about this? Would the person who's experiencing some mental ill health, who speaks to the mental health first aider, prefer to that be completely private and completely confidential? Or would they be happy for that information to be passed on? There's just so many questions about this. And finally, I think there's a real risk for the mental health first aider to become overburdened. And, you know, don't forget, they're unpaid for this. They are unpaid for this extra responsibility. So that's my first, like, oh gosh, there's got loads of chats in the chat.
I was just about to say, I think you've struck upon something that's kind of got people thinking and really talking about, you know, that impact, I guess, without having those structures and systems in place. And it's good to see actually in the chat that there's a lot of people that do have structures and systems in place.
Yeah, Judith, there's a really great question there. Where is safeguarding training and GDP regulations? Exactly. How does that fit into this? That's the question an organisation should be asking, and they're not necessarily answering that to people when they're getting their mental health first aid training. So I think there's a real kind of question mark about that. Lindsay's saying that she does provide mental health first aid training and you require a system to be in place prior to doing the training. But of course, you can't make sure that that is implemented. You don't have that space or authority to do that. Romana saying lucky to have assistance, had training reporting and confidentiality. James is saying he experienced this personally. Okay, great. James, if you wouldn't mind, can I finish just, let me just get through this slide because we're kind of running out of time otherwise. So we've got some additional risks. So the risks there are just for the mental health first aider. We also have a number of risks to the recipient. So the person who's receiving mental health support, let's call it. There's a number of issues here for me. First of all, they may believe that they are speaking to a trained mental health professional because we're calling it mental health first aid. We're not necessarily saying very clearly this is not a trained mental health professional. We're not saying very clearly this person is not a therapist. You know, if they've just seen it's written, I don't know, in their employee benefits, the handbook or something that they've got it, they don't necessarily know what that means. So they may think that they're going to get more than they do receive. They also may not get necessarily the help that they actually need. You know, I'm nervous about somebody approaching somebody in the workplace rather than going straight to a mental health professional. That makes me nervous. It's almost like building in an extra layer or the kind of the middle person where they should have gone directly to a professional about this. And another risk for that person is, of course, that they might have personal information shared with colleagues. So unless we're really clear, this whole thing around confidentiality versus recording and reporting, potentially that person who's gone to the first aider has shared really personal information, and that's then shared with, I don't know, their manager, let's say, that they wouldn't have wanted to share that information with. And then finally, some risks for the organisation itself. So I think, and Lindsay, it'll be great to get your input on the first point. It does not fulfil duties under the ISO 45003. So that specific regulation is the Health and Safety Executive Directive to essentially manage workplace stress. We can summarize it if you like in that way. There's a directive to manage workplace stress. Just putting mental health first aid in as an intervention does not fulfill that duty. Okay, so if an organisation thinks that it does, they are failing in that duty, and that is a risk. As I've said before, there's also no duty to record engagement or interactions. So therefore, there's no analysis of how effective it is as an intervention, and that's a risk. An organisation could spend lots of money and not know whether it's really helping anybody. But also, the risk there is that if we're not recording anything, we also can't analyse whether it's cost effective. So there's two aspects of that risk. One, is this actually helping people? We don't know. Two, is this good value for money? We don't know. That's a huge risk for an organisation. And I think finally, it just, I think it can end up as being a bit of a tick box exercise, really. Oh yeah, look at us, we've got mental health first aid in place. But is it working? We don't know. So I think that's a huge, huge risk to the organisation as well. Right, let's take these points. James, do you want to jump on the mic while I have a quick look in the chat box as well?
Oh, you're on mute again, James. Oh. I don't know.
We've got some sunshine, sorry, shining on the screen. Sorry about that. No, as you rightly say, the thing is that if you're in a position like this within the workplace and you're going, with the mental health in that direction, the question is, what skills, abilities has the person who's giving you the advice got? Yeah. Where do they go to for their support? As I say, I've had the experience whereby I was working through PSS, and it was permitted work. I should have had a support worker following me around. That resulted in my having my benefits stopped. It resulted in me going into the workplace again because I felt fit enough to. But with all the stress and everything that went with it, it created back for me those problems. So, that was that bit there. But as you rightly say, as far as, the duty of cares and things like that, and the actual understanding, for all the person's the skills, ability could be not necessarily even as good as, the St. John's ambulance kind of skill sets. Yeah. So I'm with you all the way, Jenny. I had an experience myself seeing a psychiatrist at one stage to be diagnosed partially through the autism thing. Sorry, psychologist. And it was one of these, he had a picture with the rabbit on the front of the paper, and on the back it showed the duck. And he was sat in the light with this picture in front of him to show me how the difference, how important it was to understand the importance of understanding how things aren't always as they seem. And I knew it was an old marketing tool anyway. So he said, "What can you see here?" And I said, "A duck." And of course, he was looking at her, and he went, "Oh, wow, nobody ever noticed that." I said, "Well, I have, because you sat in the sunlight," and it really took the thunder out of his point.
James, I'm so happy to have you here. James and Brian, I will come back to you in a moment. Please, can I just very, very quickly run through the comments in the chat? And I've got one more slide before we finish, but we've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to need to rush through this last bit. Okay, so in the chat we've got Claire saying a physical health first aider wouldn't operate on broken legs. Mental health first aid is first aid, not diagnosis, prescribing therapy, etc. Yes, and some people are really clear about that, and some people aren't. One of the things that I often say is, if you had somebody in the workplace who, I don't know, let's say found a lump in her breast, or somebody, I don't know, had, somebody else twisted their ankle, you wouldn't want them to go and see the first aider. They would just go straight to the hospital, wouldn't they? They'd go straight to the professional. And that's kind of how I feel about this as well. I'm uncomfortable that we're putting this extra layer in when somebody should be going directly to the source of support. Michael's saying organisational lip service, ? Yes, I think that's a very, very good question indeed. Julie's saying situation fraught with risk. I think so too, but we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I'll tell you why in a second. So fraught with risk. Yes, exactly. There's a lot to consider there. So confidentiality, duty of care is probably the primary thing that we need to focus on. And James is saying history is a great teacher. Absolutely. Okay, good. Jodie, good question. That's what we're going to next. Proposals for a better approach. Brian, I promise I'll come back to you before I finish. Hold that thought, please. So like I said, I don't want to A, end on a massive downer, and B, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So let's just think about some solutions and alternatives. I want to be really clear that mental health first aid training is very good mental health awareness training. Okay, there's nothing wrong with the quality of the training. It's excellent. there's some really good information contained in that training. So I'm not criticizing that at all. What I think we could do differently, and here are 6 different suggestions that I've got. The first thing is to continue, if you're in an organisation that does have it in place already, continue providing it, but make sure that you've designed the systems, processes, policies to ensure that the risks that we've just talked about are mitigated. We really especially need to see some statements around duty of care for the individual who's the first aider and also the individual who's the recipient. And we need to see well thought out plans around recording and data protection. An alternative is to cut out this idea of having individuals who carry the burden, who carry the responsibility. So cut out this concept of having a first aider and instead provide mental health awareness training for everybody in the organisation. Train everybody in the organisation to have that mental health awareness. That could mean that individuals raise an awareness within themselves. That could potentially actually reduce stigma across an organisation. And it could mean that people are thinking about it and talking about it more openly across the board, across the organisation. So that's another suggestion. Another solution or alternative is to provide well-being, resilience and emotional intelligence training rather than mental health awareness. And again, to provide that to all staff. So this is going to help people identify and manage their own well-being. Another alternative would be to provide a different type of training. So it could be well-being training, emotional intelligence training, but for managers, essentially to help managers have better quality conversations so that they know and that they are confident to have discussions around workplace stress and well-being with their team. 2 more. I cannot stress this enough, if you'll pardon the pun. We need to have a better understanding of what organisations' actual duties are under the health and safety regulations. So organisations really need to do a little bit more research and understand what their legal obligation is, their legal duties are under the IS 45003, so under their responsibility to manage workplace stress, and then create the necessary systems to deal with this. And that might look completely different to this idea of mental health first aid. It might be about stress risk assessments. It might be about making structural changes to the organisation, etc., etc. And finally, that is really it. Okay, so organisations do need to do more to address the structural causes of stress in the workplace. And that's going back to some of the things that James and Brian have mentioned today. So, you know, the type of people that come into the sector, staff turnover, the amount of trauma that we're exposed to in the sector, all of those things, they need to be addressed rather than putting this sticking plaster of a mental health first aider over the problems. So I'm sure you can think of some additions to this list, which I'd be very interested to hear from you. But how much time have we got? Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, right. Brian, unmute yourself, please, and jump on the mic. And then if there's any other time left, we will have those questions.
I think you've highlighted some of the real dangers for organizations in this. It can't be a tick box exercise.
Yes.
The problem with it being a tick box exercise is not only do you not help and resource the people who are doing the job, you affect every member of staff who may need that help. And in essence, you don't make things better, you make things worse. If, for example, somebody comes in, you know, a workman going in to do repairs in a property,
yeah,
and they are stressed because of something within the organization, if there's no record and no information recording, then you know, you may have 25 people, 25 staff who have exactly the same issue, but you have no relation to that. You have no information gathering that helps. And the other side of that is you have to have the people in place, like you said with training for managers, Managers have to understand maybe we're doing something wrong. Maybe something's not right.
Yeah.
And we need to make some changes.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that information, and it's like one that keeps coming up in relation to tenants, vulnerability of tenants is something landlords don't record at times. So how can you enable the staff to do a good job when you don't actually have the records to show that, you know, there is an issue, there is a problem. Maybe it's a computer system that just isn't working.
Yeah. And what's the first thing we learn in our sector, Brian? If it's not recorded, it didn't happen.
No. You know,
the first thing you learn in support work.
It's like that. You know, I'll be honest. I had a phone call this morning at 8 o'clock from a member of the board of directors who's fuming over something that's been posted on a Facebook page. But he's phoning me. I'm a tenant. He's a board member, but he's got all worked up over it. And this is all information that's already gone to other people. But there's no response.
No.
You know, and you've got to join the whole thing up. And it's like in many workplaces that I was in, you always had that mother figure or that father figure who, you know, if you had an issue you could talk to. And that's been lost in places. And it's partly being lost because of hybrid working, because you don't have that face-to-face conversation.
Brian, would you mind if we let James have
go ahead.
I agree with what thanks. I agree with what Brian's saying. My thing is, if everybody starts to become, you know, an expert within mental health and everybody's training, then you get self-diagnosis like we used to have the home doctor books and things like that. You'll also have the situation where they'll be diagnosing each other, and before you know, it'll be like, I'm Spartacus, no, I'm Spartacus. You know, that's the thing I have the fear of within it. People slip through the net who genuinely need that support, and it could become a very convenient thing, because I've seen it happening time and time again. You know, you'll see it, you're working in a job, you'll see people go off sick, then come back, one will go on holiday, the other will come back, then you get the agencies and everything. And this is, to me, one of the biggest problems within the workplace as such, is the grading of jobs, the input of the job that's going on, and how everybody's expecting now. It's being spread so thinly, it's like jack of all trades, master of none.
It is. Thanks, James. Marie, you had your hand up there. Did you want to jump in quickly?
Yeah, just
and then Brad.
Really. Just to give a quick positive spin. So I do emotional intelligence training, and I think looking at your culture of your organisation and the communication between your teams is the most important thing. So what I would say at this point is to be proactive within your organisation and look at providing emotional intelligence to your staff, rather than, or in partnership with mental health first aid. But for me, emotional and intelligent teams are what make great cultures.
Thanks, Marie.
Thanks, Marie. Brilliant. We've got time for one more comment from Brad.
Hi, I'm obviously very new to this sector, but coming from other sectors, I just thought, whilst this is sort of a knowledge sharing opportunity, it would be great in this case to do more of that. So when people have had successes, I don't know what forum it would happen in, but, you know, actually being able to share those case studies, you know, person X had this difficulty, these are the things we did, and actually having more of that flow of case studies and positive rollouts that have affected the organization positively, so that people can learn through osmosis that way. And I don't know how we get that opportunity and the frequency, but it'd be great to shout about the things that people are proud of, and then everyone can learn. That was all I was going to say.
That's a really nice point, and that actually would influence, that would help the reduction of stigma around mental health, if we were saying, look, people are using the service, look at the positive outcomes, etc., but it would be really difficult to keep things anonymous, I think, and it is going back to that question of, how do we record stuff? How do we record that this is working? How do we record that people are even having sessions with a mental health first aider? So many organisations aren't even recording those basic numbers. So that's really my problem with it. And like I said, I don't have anything against the training itself. I just think that as a sector, we need to take responsibility to make it work for us. If we're going to implement it, we need other things to be built in around it, or alternatives. But thank you all so much. This was such a very, very lively chat today. So yeah, thanks everyone. I didn't say, but feel free to keep in touch with me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Jennie Blake, Jennie with an IE, or drop me an email if you wish. But yeah, please do keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you again for everybody for today. Take care and see you soon.